KC Joyner, NFL Insider, joins us now as we take a look back at a wild week number 10. And KC, a lot of times when we start off on Friday breaking down these games, we laugh at a lot of the matchups, wondering how this team can be competitive, how this team can be in the game. We saw 3 teams win on Sunday that really were, 2 of which were double-digit underdogs. So we'll get to a wild slate of games. But welcome back to the show. How are you, pal?
Doing great. That was a fun day of football yesterday.
It sure was. We had a great game last night. Tonight's game is a great one, so let's start with that. Seahawks and 49ers. You got San Francisco obviously undefeated with that very great defense. And then you got the Seahawks who, you look at the 7-2 record on the surface and Russell Wilson playing at an MVP level, you think, But the Seahawks have had a lot of close games against some bad teams. If Wilson's not being Russell Wilson, who knows what their record would be right now. So do you look at the Seattle Seahawks and say that record maybe isn't indicative of who they are? What do you see in that game tonight?
I see kind of like we talk about Kansas City coming into the season. Kansas City realized you get in a lot of shootout games. They're low percentage propositions. And I see Seattle winning those games, but that's not the team they want to be. I don't think they want, that Wilson leads the NFL in touchdown passes. That's great. You don't want that if you're them. That's not the kind of style that you want to be. So they'd like to get to, more of a smash mouth style, and they've got the capability to do it. And this contest may make them do it, but funny thing is they may want to go into a shootout mode tonight because it's one thing San Francisco probably doesn't handle well if they had to get in a shootout. So this might be a game where Seattle shootout propensity could help them.
Yeah, and I know Kittle might not play tonight. When you look at San Francisco in the offense, I mean, is that a huge loss for them, or do they have enough weapons that we don't? I don't think we think of San Francisco as an offensive team, but they score the 3rd most points in the league.
Yeah, they do, and they have a great power running offense, and they do a lot of things. They can both beat you power running it, and they also can scheme you in the mistakes on defense. They can also Kyle Shanahan might be the best play caller in the league. He can get you to make mistakes in both the passing game and the running game. As far as Kittle goes, Seattle's, I mentioned before my red, yellow, green ratings for players, and that if you've got a green rated matchup, it's a highly favored matchup. Seattle's tight end coverage right now is a green rated matchup for San Francisco. So they've got Tololo, they've got Dwelly, I believe, is another tight end for them. I don't think they'll have big games, but I think they can still get tight end production even with Kittle out.
Yeah, and of course their defense is, if not the best, it's one of the top 5 in the league right now. How do you see that matchup against Russell Wilson in that offense?
They do a fantastic job. They're very, very disciplined, and you can't. They won't let you run wide because they play a type of front that usually keeps you from running wide. That's not going to be a problem for Seattle because Seattle likes to do smash mouth, and I think Seattle is going to try to do that. But Seattle's offensive line, a couple years ago, we were talking about them being the worst offensive line in the league, and they still have talent issues. Not too much for their coach, but their offensive line coach. He's not been the most consistent coach before, but right now he has them doing a smash mouth brand of running. So it's going to be interesting to see because I think that San Francisco would like Seattle to try to go smash mouth and do a juggernaut thing, and I think Seattle may need to throw the ball more often today. But if they try and run the ball, San Francisco is not going to give them a lot of big gains because San Francisco is very disciplined on defense.
Well, I went out on a limb earlier, Casey. I think San Francisco wins, and I think it's not competitive. I don't think it's a close game. I think they win big at home tonight. How do you see it?
I think they win. I think they win. I'm not sure that they blow Seattle out because, again, Seattle has the connection between Wilson and Tyler Lockett. Last year they did so well that they actually broke the charts in my fantasy football draft guide. They just screwed up the whole thing because they were so dominant, made everybody else. It made a 10-yard per attempt total for players look like it was an average number. But as good as that is, I just don't think I don't think Seattle is going to be able to get those connections quite as much, and I think San Francisco is going to power run the football and win.
All right, don't forget Casey's back on Friday. We'll get the breakdown and lowdown on the Eagles and the Patriots, but right now, let's take a look back at Week 10 and what we saw and what we now know, which is always hard to kind of say in this ever-changing league, but we'll try. Here we go. You had the Bears beat the Lions. The Lions all of a sudden kind of falling back to the pack and now stubbing their toe on the road at Chicago. I know they had the backup quarterback there, but all of a sudden it feels like the Lions are more the Lions we thought they'd be. And the Bears, I don't know if they're still in this, but I guess they kept themselves relevant at least for one more week.
They did, and to show that Trubisky can actually do something, that he's been so bad for so long and he looked good for quarter and a half, maybe a half of a game yesterday, so that's good. And Detroit, that they could not run the ball against Chicago's run defense, have been struggling very badly, but that they really couldn't keep that going. That says that Patricia just doesn't have the kind of team that he wants to have, so they got to start over, I think, after the season.
All right, Jeff Driscoll, by the way, was the leading passer in that game with 269 yards. All right, Ravens go to Cincinnati. Bengals are dumpster fire. But Jackson is the story, emerging as maybe the MVP favorite, but really changing the game.
He is, and the thing is that you still have to put him into a system that will utilize all of his talents. People talk about he could be a drop-back passer. Yes, but if you just put him in a drop-back offense and didn't take advantage of his running ability, you'd be selling him short. So the Baltimore is taking advantage of both of his skill sets and saying, we'll let you run, plan for it, and you can scramble too. We'll get that. We'll get your running talents involved, and we'll let you drop-back pass. It speaks volumes. And by the way, he's got great passing numbers with a receiving core that just really isn't that good.
Yeah, he's completing almost, 67% of his passes. It's been fun to watch. He threw 3 touchdowns yesterday, 49-13. Ravens. Browns 3-6. They beat the Bills 6-3. I mean, the Bills still at 6-3 are in the playoff mix right now, but that's the kind of game that if you really want to be taken serious, I know the going on the road is a different story sometimes, but this is not a very good Browns team.
It's not a very good Browns team, and what they did on the goal line, it was, it was, you know, that first one where they had 6 or 7 plays, they didn't get in the second time, they didn't get in. I mean, they were horrible. But they got the goal line touchdown toward the end of the game. The goal touchdown at the end of the game is a big plus for them. Thing to worry about for Buffalo, Levi Wallace is the cornerback who lines up opposite of White, and he has been very good this year. He looked bad yesterday, and if they have a problem with him in coverage, teams are going to start exploiting that. And if that'd be a big problem for Buffalo's defense, because their offense just is never going to be able to keep up if you score 20 points and work on them consistently.
Browns win 19-16. Let's go to Tennessee. This is a wild game here. I mean, the Titans are one of those teams. They get to 5-5 somehow by beating the Chiefs. The Titans are one of those teams that's like they win on the road, they lose at home. I mean, they beat good teams, they lose to bad teams. I don't know that you can tell me what you think about the Titans in terms of I figured them out, but 35-32 over Kansas City. What's wrong with the Chiefs?
What's wrong with the Chiefs is they came into this season. Last year they had 9 shootout games, and I call a shootout game when each team scores 24 or more points. They had 9 of those games. They were 5-4 in those contests. They came into this season thinking we don't want to get into shootout games. Well, guess what? You've gotten into 7 of them so far this year, and you're 4-3 in those games. So, I mean, actually, they got into 6 of them, and they had a 26-23 contest that they won. So they're 3-3 in shootout games this year. They're getting into too many of them. They can't keep doing that, and they can't figure a way to not do that. So I think they need to get away from going so pass-heavy in offense. And I know it's got points, but you got to also control the clock. Get to a place where you can not lean on Mahomes as much. Until Kansas City does that, this is going to keep happening.
All right, Titans 5-5, Chiefs 6-4. And by the way, the Raiders, who we talked about on their Thursday night game, they are right behind the Chiefs in that NFC or AFC West. Let's go to another bonkers game. Wow, the Saints fall to 7-2. Atlanta is 2-7. This game was never close. How did the Falcons go on the road and beat the Saints so handily?
I honestly, I'm scratching my head because there's nothing in the matchup. Actually, and remember, Atlanta was missing Desmond Trufant. They're missing one of their top cornerbacks, and you'd think that New Orleans would be able to throw the ball a ton there. I think New Orleans, they want to be a run-heavy team is what they'd like to be, and so I don't know that they attack the Atlanta secondary in the same ways that they should have, and because they've got the 2 running backs now. They're thinking, okay, we've got these guys. That's what we need to be. And honestly, there's sometimes when you just had to be a pass-heavy team, and I don't know that they want Drew Brees to be a pass-heavy team. So I think maybe they need to decide what type of offense they want to be, and if they don't want to be a pass-happy offense, stick to then you're going to get into some of these contests.
Let's go to, by the way, 26-9 Falcons win. Giants, Jets. I mean, the Jets, Darnold said after it, hey, we win out, we can still make the playoffs. I don't know that you saw anything in that game that would suggest they're ready to win out. Giants' miserable season continues.
If the Jets play the Giants every single week, yeah, you get a shot at making the playoffs. But funny, the schedule is going to get you in different places than facing the Giants. The Giants' defense, I still think the Giants, I like where they're progressing. I think that they're, Barkley had an X-ray. There's some sort of possible injury issue. I guess it came back negative, but still the idea that has a problem with them. I still like where they're going. The Jets, though, you beat the Giants, you beat a bad defense. I'm not still convinced, although Darnold is showing, he showed yesterday why people were thinking he was such a great quarterback in college.
KC Joyner, NFL Insider, looking back at week number 10. Buccaneers beat the Cardinals 30-27. Both teams now 3-6. Just one of those games that two teams just trying to find who they are, trying to find some sort of identity as they march through the long season.
Yeah, it is, and it's good to see Winston. He's playing it. He's hitting the big plays, and that against that defense, he can get big plays. But those are both teams that, again, they get in the shootout contest, and you just can't get into those in this league. But if you've got a lack of talent, that's what you need to get into. So that in their case, that's what they're going to do. They don't have a ton of talent across the board on those teams. I mean, they've got some big play players, but you're talking, hey, is this a team that can go toe-to-toe? The big guys, they can't. So that's the type of contest they tend to get into. So see what happens is really not a surprise.
Yep, and by the way, Winston, 358 yards in the game, and Christian Kirk for Arizona, 138, 3 touchdowns. Some big numbers put up in that one. Colts lose at home. I know Hoyer plays, but this is an unacceptable kind of loss if you want to be taken serious. I don't care who's playing quarterback. The Dolphins win again.
The Dolphins are playing so well. We keep talking about each week. The Dolphins are playing better every week. They do have a talent issue. They're not a very talented team, and yes, the Colts should beat them, but the Dolphins keep playing tough every single week, and you can't look at them now as just this automatic win, and I think the Colts probably didn't take them quite as seriously as they should. And and the Colts needed to be a run-heavy offense yesterday. They need to lead on Mack and give him a ton of carries against the Dolphins' run defense that still isn't that good. And that's not what they did. So I think and also the Colts had the problem with the kicking game too. And I think that when you add all those factors together, they're just not going to win close games.
All right, KC go to Green Bay, where they win again. They beat the Panthers in the snow. They get to 8-2. Panthers, that would have been a big win for them. Now they kind of fall back to the muddled wild card pack with everybody else in there. But Green Bay stays at top of the division.
I love the idea that Rodgers comes out and says we need, last week was a wake-up call, and we need to go back to, he's really trying to say we need to go back to leaning on the ground game and be a run-heavy team and then pass vertical, because that's what he likes. He knows that's where he's had his best success, when they're a ground-heavy team, and then he just throws vertical off of that. And they started to get a bit away from that. Now he got them back to that. And as long as they stick to that formula, that's a team that can beat anybody in the league. And I'm talking even New England, I'm talking even San Francisco. They can win those contests if they stick to that formula.
I know our Twitter followers sometimes will text you or tweet at you about Tomlining, but he's doing a pretty darn good job with this team all of a sudden. They win at home against the Rams, 17-12. Number one, Steelers 5-4. They're starting to play better football. Fitzpatrick has really spearheaded the defense. And what's up with the Rams?
What's up with the Rams is teams after that Super Bowl, they figured out how to stop the Rams. And what's up also with the Rams is they faced the Steelers defense that has stockpiled a ton of talent. When you look at what they've done in their secondary with the people they've added, when they've added Nelson, they added Hayden, and now Minkah Fitzpatrick. Minkah Fitzpatrick is Defensive Player of the Year over the past 6-7 weeks. He's playing at that kind of level. They've done that, and the Rams have been figured out. Plus the Steelers last year had what George Young used to say: you can't have Palace revolts. The old general manager of the Giants said you can't have Palace revolts in your team because it'll cause big problems. The Steelers had Palace revolts last year. They got that cleaned up, and now that they've got that cleaned up and have this defense playing at this level, this is who you can expect them to be the rest of the year.
Interesting stuff. Let's go to the Sunday night game last night where the Vikings do something they don't do often. They went on the road and beat a pretty good team in Dallas. Dallas falls to 5-4. Vikings are now 7-3. They stay within arm's distance of Green Bay. They're in the wild card race, and the Cowboys and Eagles are all knotted up at the top of the East.
I thought the Cowboys early in the year that they were going to be like Cowboys were a couple years ago, and they were going to have the offensive line that just controlled and dominated games. But right now, they can't seem to. They're giving up too many points. They're giving up big plays in the secondary. And Minnesota, I'm still curious about them because you know that they don't want to be a pass-happy team, but that's what they end up. They've got Cook and they're running very well, but I still think they're leaning a little too heavily on the passing game. So I look at that and go, they need to get into more low-scoring games. They don't want to get into what they got into yesterday if they can help it. But to be able to go to Dallas and do that, people are starting to believe in Cousins. I think the team is finally starting to believe in Cousins because I think for a time the players in that team weren't quite buying into him, and now he's kind of won them over.
All right, we got 5-4 Dallas, 5-4 Philly. You look at those two teams right now, 9 games in, tied at the top of the East. Dallas has won head-to-head. Do you feel that those two teams are equal? Do you like one better than the other? How do you handicap the East?
I handicap the East right now a bit for Philadelphia. I know they've got a tough matchup coming up. I'm looking at Dallas' schedule, and you've got New England, Buffalo, the Rams, at Philly later in the season. I mean, those are some really tough matchups there for them, and I think that doesn't bode quite as well for them as the schedule bodes for Philadelphia. When you're talking Philadelphia has Miami, which I think they should win that game. They've got the Giants, twice. They've got Washington. I mean, they just have a slightly more favorable schedule. So right now, I'd say Philadelphia has a slight edge in that area.
All right, NFL Insider KC Joyner is back on Friday as we get ready for Eagles and Patriots. And, of course, you can hear that game on 97.3 ESPN. Week 10, wild one in the books. Breaking it down with us, KC Joyner. Thanks, pal.
Appreciate it.
KC Joyner, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.